contact angle techniques where it tries to measure the wettability of the two surface. Here you have a substrate and you have a material, or you have a liquid material, and what you are trying to understand is the spreading or the wetting nature of the liquid on the solid surface. It's a famous Young's equations where you have three surface energy terms like gamma Sv, which is related with the solid surface, and you have Sl, which is related with the interfacial energy of liquid and surface, and you have an angle that is made by gamma Sl. This is Young's equation, and when you have contact angle theta small, you have a liquid that is spreads very easily. It is very close to zero. If it is close to zero, and when you have at a higher end, here you have the sphericity is increased, and finally in a non-wetting conditions you have more than 90°, and you have a this can be understood by just a simple method, like you have a liquid which is on the surface, and you are trying using a camera. You can measure the contact angle in a dynamic condition, so how the spreading happens, and how the wettability is it is done. So here you have the theta, and you have different methods. Like this is the famous sessile drop method, which is largely used. And you have other also can be used at different conditions to understand the wettability. Here, rectangle can be splitting nature of the liquid. The biocompatibility is changed when the liquid is in contact with the surface. The blood is in contact with the biomaterial, or any other body fluid is in contact with the solid. So you have to understand that to get more information about biocompatibility. So biomaterials are becoming increasingly popular in medical, biomedical, optometric, dental, etc., etc., since they are coming into close contact with the living cells and biological fluids. The impact of contact angle on the biocompatibility of a tissue engineering substrate, blood contacting devices, dental implants. So the usage of the contact angle measurement is endless. So everywhere you need to look at that particular aspect. So next is the spectroscopic techniques, where this is the famous electromagnetic you have the diagram. So electromagnetic waves are distributed with respect. The spectroscopy is the science of study with the interaction between the radiation and the matter. So you have radiations at a different wavelength, and with the small matters like electrons or atoms or molecules, etc., which cannot be understood directly by any other method. So spectroscopic method is very important. So the first one is the vibration spectroscopy. Vibration spectroscopy is used infrared rays, infrared radiations, and the infrared radiation having a direct contact with the vibration mode of different molecules, and it is based on the measurement of vibrational energy which are associated with the chemical bonds in a molecule. The material spectra could be used as a fingerprint for identification of unknown compounds. So once you know the vibration spectra, so what you can understand is, yeah, that particular bonding is exist, or the bonding between the two molecules existed, and you can find out, yeah, this particular compound is present. To assess the close intermolecular interaction of specific group. The spectra obtained by scattering and absorption of infrared light are used to provide vibrational data from solid state or gas phase samples. So these are the two characterization techniques which is largely used. One is FTIR, another one is Raman spectroscopy. Electromagnetic radiation at wavelength larger than red end of visible light and shorter than the microwave. So this is the IR. Now where the IR is present in the spectrum. And see, this is the window of near IR, like 14,000 to 4,000 per centimeter, and here this is 4,000 to 400 wave number. So this is represented in terms of wave number, and for IR is between 400 to 20 to 400, 20 and 400. And near IR having the what it gives the information about the changes in vibration and rotation levels, electron transitions. And this is the most important region where changes in the vibration levels of most molecules can be understood, and this is the rotation energy levels change. So what is the vibration levels of the molecule? Different type of vibration. One is called the stretching. So once you bombard or once you apply the infrared radiation to the molecule goes to a different energy level and excited level, and there is an excitation and relaxation process where it's continuously it is done, and this infrared radiation actually will be in a resonance with this particular vibration of the molecules, and in the end for the vibration of the atomic bonds. This is actually the stretching, and this is the bending action of the molecule. Bending having different ways of stretching and bending. These two having different type of modes of stretching and bending. That also you can find out from the FTIR spectrum. So FTIR, a molecular spectroscopy which is used to characterize both organic and inorganic evidence. The sample is bombarded with infrared radiations. When the frequency of the infrared radiation matches with the natural frequency of the bond, the amplitude of the vibration increases and the infrared is absorbed. So what you get is there is an absorption of infrared for the vibration of the bond. So in the spectrum, the spectrum is made x-axis as the wave number and y-axis as the intensity. And so here this is actually infrared transmittance, usually 100 and going down to 100 to 0. So this is how it is, and you have this transmittance. This is transmittance, and you have this particular curve shows the absorption of infrared light, infrared radiations, and this particular wave number is corresponding to the particular bond of that or presence of the bond of that particular molecule. So the key parameters you need to take care is the intensity, weak, medium or strong, then shape, broad or sharp, and position. The position actually give you the information about the that particular bond, and intensity give you the information about the absorption, and shape will give you, shape means broad or sharp, which will give you any other bond present along with that particular molecule, like in order to make it stretch, like hydrogen bonding. So that will give the that will broad that particular peak, and you have many other peaks can be observed. Like you have like a double bond, triple bond, and you have different type of bending bending spectra, which is directly or indirectly you have of any molecule. This is not sometimes it is not direct. Few. So this is how the FTIR is technique is used. The next is the Raman spectroscopy, where you have the same IR infrared radiations. But here, what you see, instead of the absorptions, we use the scattered, the scattering of the radiations, and it is a scattering of the radiation that gives the information about molecular structure. So you have an incident laser, and if it is not influencing the molecules, now the intensity or the wavelength of the laser is the same. It is called the Rayleigh scattering. And once now it is inelastic, then you have two modes. One is called the Stokes and another one is called the anti-Stokes. In the case of Stokes, you have wavelength which is less than the anti-Stokes. Anti-Stokes, you have wavelength of the scattering. The scattered ray is less than the wavelength of the incident laser. And Stokes, in the case of Stokes-Raman scattering, you have gamma scatter is greater than the gamma laser. So these are the two things you are interested to understand, because they are the signature of that particular vibration mode of the molecule. So here you are trying to get the information from an inelastic scattered ray radiation. So in this case, you have intensity versus Raman shift. Raman shift is nothing but you have there's a difference between the incident, the wavelength of the incident, wavelength of the transmitted minus the wavelength of the incident radiation, and you plot with respect to intensity of the radiation. So you can get a similar similar graph, and you can get more information from the Raman shift than IR spectra, because some of the this Raman spectroscopy can be used for many materials compared to. So enable determination of spatial structure of electron density distribution and electronic vibrational interaction in biomolecules and biomaterials. This particular wave number is corresponding to this particular CN compound. So you can get information, structural information about any molecules by using the gamma spectra or FTIR. Then next is more advanced. Like here we use nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, NMR, where we use the the nuclear magnetic of nuclear technique that is used in for determining the content and purity of a sample as well as its molecular structure. NMR can quantitatively analyze mixtures containing known compound. Here, if you have a known compound, so and suppose you are done some modification in that and trying to understand how the modification actually influence in the structure. In that case, you can use the NMR spectrum, where most of the time NMR is used for the shift, the chemical shift of the compound. So for known compound, NMR can either be used to match against the spectral libraries or to interfere with the basic structure directly. Once the basic structure is known, NMR can be used to determine the molecular conformation, physical properties at the molecular level, such as conformation, etc., solubility, diffusion. The composition of the reaction mixture and the component structure of this particular composite coastal nanostructure was determined by NMR spectroscopy. This is the one example taken from the study of biomaterial. So this is nothing but you have compounds having spin quantum number, like now you have 1h proton, where you have a quantum number like plus half or minus half, and you have that particular electrons at a particular spin. And once you have usually now the nucleus with spin at a lower energy generate a magnetic field in the direction of the external magnetic field. So you have a solution containing this particular proton, and you apply a magnetic field direction of the external magnetic field, and when it opposes, the spin opposes, it goes to a higher energy level, and when large amount of such protons are moving, to a higher energy level, immediately it comes back to the relaxation stage, and this particular exercise continues, giving a vibration or at a frequency of radio frequency, and this radio frequency can be resonated with an external the frequency or the energy required to get that particular higher energy level of the particular atom. So the emitted frequency is the characteristics one for the nuclei is this particular frequency mu is equal is related with the magnetic field V0. So instrumentation. So this is the one which I told. You can get the radio frequency oscillator, and you can get a radio frequency output which is resonated. Now after the resonance with this particular vibration of electrons from higher energy to lower energy and vice versa. Here, regarding the chemical shift, what you have a material called tetramethylene selenium, which is taken as the first. The position of the peaks in NMR spectrum relative to the reference peak is expressed in the case of chemical shift. So how you have a reference and you have your sample, and you are taking the difference between the frequency of your new sample and the whose signal is taken as 0, and the shift in the position of NMR region resulting from the shielding and de-shielding by electron is called a chemical shift. Shielding is nothing but a higher electron density. The higher electron density around the nucleus, the higher the opposing magnetic field to B0 from the electrons. Suppose you have higher electron density near the nucleus of the particular molecule, then electron density around the nucleus, you have higher opposing magnetic field B0 from the electrons and greater shielding. Because the proton experience lower external magnetic field, it needs lower frequency to achieve resonance. Already it is in the opposite direction. So in order to achieve the opposite spin, you require only less frequency. So in that case, the shift is called upfield or shielded nuclei. You have a slight deviation or the shift from the 0. So similarly, de-shield is just opposite to that. You have lower energy density around the electron density around the nucleus. You have larger frequency required to change the lower energy state of the spin to a higher energy state. So in this case, different compound having different shielding and de-shielding characteristics. So in NMR spectrum will give you that represents the shielding and de-shielding, and you can compare that with the reference sample and get the nature of the spectral change. So this is all about the NMR spectroscopy. Then next is the mass spectrometry. So in the case of mass spectrometry, you have the compound. That compound is ionized by heating or vaporized and ionized at a high energy at a heater, and these ions are accelerated and between two magnets, where the magnetic field deflect the lightest ions, deflect all the ions at different rate, because the magnetic field deflects lightest ions most. So heavier ions will be less. Like that, the detector detects the ions having different kinetic energy, and time of flight is different for different ions, and the spectrum is formed with respect to relative intensity and m divided by atomic number. So from this spectra, you can get different peaks that represents the different ions, and you can get direct information about the particular molecule complex measure whatever photon spectroscopy, you have a low energy X-ray source, the surface of the sample, and the photo electrons. The electrons comes out from the represents the characteristics of the particular material or particular element. So this is called the photoelectron. The corresponding spectrum is formed. So this is how it is. You have the binding energy corresponding to the different electrons at different shells, and the intensity of the X-ray photoelectrons. And you have different peaks that corresponding to the the binding energy of that particular element. The electrons corresponding this particular binding energy corresponding to the electrons of the nitrogen, electrons at K, and titanium, then again titanium 2s, oxygen. Like that, you can have the detection of elements from the diagram, from the XPS diagram. Examples, again the same. So far widely employed surface techniques, the analysis of chemical composition, structure, and contamination, the presence of contamination, segregation of elements. So this is a direct technique where you can get the information about the element present on the surface. The technique can be used for the development of new material. Okay, fine. Next is the electron dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, or EDX or WDX. So this is actually in the it's coupled. You can find these spectroscopy techniques with imaging, SEM, and TEM techniques. Energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, or WDX, is a surface analysis method that is a semi-quantitative chemical analysis of the sample. This again this method relies on the radiation of the sample. Hello?
Srikumar sir, our schedule is still 3:45. Time is almost nearing. We should have a small question answer section too. 4:45.
Okay. So yeah, just I will complete. Okay. So you have energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy. In this techniques, you can get elemental information. The information about the element present in the material. And WDX DX is nothing but it is similar to EDX, where instead of energy we are calculating the wavelength of the characteristics X-ray that is coming out from the material. So this is the interaction volume of electron beam. So from where we are getting the X-rays. So here you have the primary electrons, and when these electron beams are going for an inelastic scattering, where the characteristic X-rays are formed, and it is these X-rays are emitted from the sample and is collected by a detector, and the energy and the wavelength of that particular X-ray is calculated and it is plotted with respect to the intensity. So it's a useful method to the imaging technique. In the imaging technique, you have light microscopy and confocal microscopy. In the case of biological samples, you can go more with the confocal rather than the typical light compound microscope, because the information that you can get from confocal microscopy, the contrast is quite high because of the peculiarity or the instrumentation of the confocal microscopy, where you have the laser beam and you have a more focused laser beam, and the unnecessary scattered rays are detected from the by the confocal different apertures, and you can get more focused beams. And as a result, you have the depth of field at a very high depth of field than the typical optical compound microscope. That's why these are the you can find the difference between the clarity or the focus, the autofocus of the light microscope and the the clear picture of the particular biomaterial. So next, so I'll skip this, and next is the electron microscopy. So in the case of electron microscopy, where actually the light microscopy is lagging in terms of the magnification and the resolution and other things, things like that, where you can get all the information about the material at a very minute level from scanning electron microscope and transmission electron microscope. So this is one example where light microscope and how detailed information you can get from scanning and transmission electron microscope. And scanning electron microscope, it is I'll directly go to the instrumentation part. So you have electron gun at a very high voltage. You have the electrons, and these electrons are focused and by the magnetic lens, and they are bombarded to the specimen, and the primary electrons, which is shown in the interaction volume, and you have a different type of electrons are coming out from the specimen, like secondary electrons, and then you have backscattered electrons, which is the same electron B, the primary electrons, and you have OJ electrons. So you can collect all of these different type of electrons and get the corresponding image. Here in the case of secondary electrons, which is coming out from the imaging of the backscattered also gives you the characteristics of the material, so that also can be directly used for the name suggests a magnetic coil which deflects continuously, and it deflects the beam of the electrons to XY, and now the scanning is done by a raster pattern. So that's how the imaging is done by NSEM. So either you are using backscatter, doesn't matter. The primary electrons are are shifted to X and Y and scanned on the surface of the sample to get the image. So this is the example of different scanning electron microscopy. You can see the same material having different structures, and all the structure of different tissues can be easily identified, distinguished, and understood in terms of the size, shape, and morphology from the scanning electron microscope. And the contrast of the image is exceptionally good, and you can get even the latest SEM will give you a resolution of around 1 nanometer, like FACM. And you have the biomaterials, like the interface between like the tooth and the tooth filling. So these sort of informations you can get. Then the cell, how the cell is grown, or the top of the tubular structure, which can be clearly understood. It's a uniform or is a continuous or discontinuous. This sort of information you can get from SEM. So next is the transmission electron microscopy, where you have the filaments, and you have the same electron beam, which is passed through the sample, not the reflected, but you have the samples which is held in between the objective lens and the projection lens, and the projection lens magnifies the electron beam, and you get a highly magnified image at the bottom of the imaging system, at the phosphorus screen, or you can have a detector to get the large image, collect the electrons and get the digital image. So here you have a very high voltage or high energy electrons, which is actually passed through the sample and give you the information. So you have different contrasts, where you have this dark area where the electrons, some of the electrons are scattered back, and some of the electrons are passed through the sample, where you can get the dark images. And you have the nanotube, which is the nanotube. This is the nanotube, and you have a nickel inside. So detailed information of the material can be achieved by transmission electron microscopy, much better than scanning electron microscopy. So in the case of bio, you have RBC, then it's a red blood cell in the transmission electron microscope. So that's it. Then next is the scanning probe microscopy, where you have the probe. Now you have a probe, and the probe is connected with the coarse positioning system, and the samples are connected with a piezoelectric scanner, and the scanning is done as we talked in the case of scanning electron microscopy. Here also you do the scanning with the probe tip, and you have atomistic contact with respect to the sample, the tip and the sample, and the positioning of the tip is adjusted by the sensing, the different sensors. So I'm just going in speed all these things. So you have the tip having the tip should have a size of few atomic level, and your sample also will have in a direct contact with the atoms of the tip. Here tunneling microscope, scanning tunneling microscope, where the tip and the sample will have a tunneling current between the tip and the sample, and the tunneling current is the main parameter which give you the surface topography of the material. The scanning is done by keeping the tunneling current between the tip and the sample constant. So in effect, the position of the tip will be the same throughout the is adjusted with respect to the hills and valleys of the sample. So this is tunneling scanning tunneling microscope. Then atom force microscope, where you utilize the force between the atoms of the sample and the tip of the AFM. And this particular graph, where you have a like a large two atoms are in a very large distance. You have like attractive force, then when it comes in contact, there will be large repulsive force. This particular attractive and repulsive force are used for getting different modes of AFM, like contact mode, non-contact mode, and tapping mode. And here also, like adjusting the height and the force between the atoms of the tip and the sample, you can get the topographic image of the sample. So this is how the image looks like a bacterium. This like this atomic resolution of graphene, providing its uniform honeycomb structure. So thank you very much. Even though I couldn't finish it well in the last few slides, I'm very sorry for that.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, sir. So,
thank you much.
Before I thank him, at this point, I would like to say something about Srikumar sir, because he is someone who constantly support our institution and our initiatives. And we had a great time learning from him as a colleague and now through this FDP. So on behalf of whole team and participants, we thank you for sharing your valuable knowledge on structural characterization of biomaterials. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So
it's my pleasure.
So with this, we have successfully completed the second day of our FDP. I thank everyone for your active participation. See you all tomorrow. Thank you and have a good evening. Feedback form is shared. Please fill it before you leave.